Okay, cool. So from here, it's like you've gone over the intro, you've gone over the digital documents, you've gone over the telemapper, you've gone over the pay. Now, key thing is to go over the training program. Okay. Thought process. Thought process is really important to understand that your goal here is to get people to understand the why behind the what. Now, really important. I see people make this mistake a lot where they treat this part like a second round interview. Don't do that. That's not what you're trying to do. You're not trying to treat it like a second round interview. You're trying to break down the business for them to make it make sense. Okay. First thing. Second thing is you want to make sure that you're going over negatives, right? Going over negatives is really, really important because if you don't go over negatives at the end of everything, you kind of want to set the expectations the right way. If you don't go over them, you don't set the expectations the right way. Okay, cool. So the first thing I do when I break down the training program, look, 100% stole this from Amani, not gonna lie. She talks about, I'll ask people, hey, who's ever read like Forbes magazine? So basically, Forbes magazines in 2020 during COVID, they were going over reasons why people leave companies, right? And they identified two of the main reasons why people actually leave companies. And the two main things that they found out was that people leave companies mainly due to a lack of standards and expectations, right? Since that people like were kind of like not really doing the job to what the standard was, and then they ended up getting like fired long term. And the second reason was because people just didn't know what was next, right? So people have been working a job, they were there for like 5 6 months, and then they're like, is this it? And people didn't quite understand like what the next thing was, right? So because of that, people turn over companies. Now I'll let people know. I'm like, hey, so what we're gonna do now is we're gonna go over a breakdown of our management training program. Now, the first thing I want everyone to understand is that it's broken down into 4 phases. Okay. Now, the training program is broken down into 4 phases. And the first thing I want everyone to understand is that everyone in this room was hired for phase 4. We just have to train you on how to get there. Now, the reason why we have to train you on how to get there is because we work with different kinds of clients, right? Right now, um, we have Primo. So Primo is one of the clients that we just recently acquired. It was Ready Refresh and Primo bought out Ready Refresh, and basically they joined now. They're one of the largest water distribution companies. I'll talk about Thompson and Creek. Thompson and Creek, basically, they're a home improvement company. They're local. That's kind of the dealer we work with. AT&T obviously is one of the larger clients that we work with. Right now, to these clients, you as an individual, I'll tell people this: are you more valuable to a client like AT&T, knowing how to do 20 cell phone lines yourself, or are you more valuable to a client like AT&T, knowing how to train and manage 10 people and how to do 10 cell phone lines each, right? Typically the latter. So understand that this is a training program. Then I'll go into the phases, right? So it's broken down into 4 phases. Just let me know if I'm still in the strategy. So training programs broken down into 4 phases. So it's phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, then phase 4. Okay. So phase 1, it's known as acquisition specialist, right? People are in here for anywhere from about 3 to 5 weeks. Really important here. It's small, but it's really important to be detailed with this. This should match up with what you put on the orientation packet, right? Meaning that this should also match up with what your leaders are saying to people, right, on the second round interview. Because if this is 2 to 4 weeks and then your leaders are saying 3 to 5 weeks, there's no consistency, right? You want, when you're running a business, you want to make sure that there's a lot of streamlined communication, that this chain is speaking to this chain and this chain is speaking to this chain, right? So make sure that this is aligned with what's on the orientation packet, as well as what the leaders are saying on the second round interview. So acquisition specialist here for about 3 to 5 weeks. Main things we really focus on here, I'll let people know, is we focus on the marketing systems, right? Now I'll explain that these marketing systems, they were developed about 40 years ago by Harvard graduates, right? So basically, what it allows people to do is it allows people who aren't necessarily good at talking to people who are like shy to do really, really well at the sales and marketing aspect of what we do, right? So I talk about the marketing systems here. Now I like to use examples there. Like, I know I'm gonna call you out, but basically Alyssa, I always say, I'm like, Alyssa, she's a super shy gal, but she absolutely crushed it in the field because she follows these marketing systems, right? Now, at the same time, I educate people on the fact that, hey, with these marketing systems, we have to make sure that you understand these marketing systems. So there's a grading system here. Now, the reason why we have some form of a grading slash checklist is because and I'm telling people this, when you get into phase two, the whole goal is really to train individuals who are in phase one, right? Now, individuals who are in phase one, would you like to be coached and trained by someone who has no idea what they're doing? He'll be like, hell no. So I'm like, exactly. So we have to make sure that you understand these marketing systems prior to moving into phase two. Now, important thing, I see a lot of people make this mistake. They'll say, get promoted. Get promoted sounds weird when they haven't been in the business for a while, right? So make sure you're using words like transitioned or moved into. You're not necessarily saying get promoted, because get promoted, I don't know, it just comes off really funky and like juicy enough, right? So let's make sure that here, that's a bad term to use, but basically you want to make sure that here you're saying, hey, that individual, you're still kind of talking like it's a second round interview, right? Like I said, don't treat it like a second round interview, but use things like individual, that person. Don't be like, you will, because you're not promising anything, right? Understand that it's an opportunity, not a guarantee, right? So the way you're communicating and your tone and the things that you're saying should be aligned with the fact that this individual, you're still kind of sussing them out, almost like a third round interview here. Okay, right? So individual will transition into phase two of the training program. Here, position corporate trainer, 4 to 10 months. Again, really important. Make sure that this correlates with whatever you're saying on the onboarding packet, as well as the second round interview, right? And the wow, it's really getting slanted. I'm sorry, guys. I'm trying my best. It's better, right? Okay, so phase number two, the main things that we focus on here is we focus on training people on how to train other individuals, right? Now, what the example I use here, and this means a lot to a lot of people, but I'll ask, I'm like, hey, who here has worked at a big company? And they'll be like, oh, yeah, like I worked at Walmart. And I'll ask them, I'm like, hey, did they make you watch a bunch of videos? They'll be like, yeah, dude, it was crazy. They had me sitting there for like 5 hours. And I was just watching a bunch of videos. I'm like, yeah, 100%. Because a lot of these larger companies, they believe in a one size fits all mentality, meaning that everyone's trained the same, right? Now, you want to make people feel special, right? Special in the sense that the way that we do our training is it's all individualized. So you are partnered with a mentor. The mentor is the person who conducted your second round interview, and they're actually going to help train you throughout the training program. So they're responsible for helping you get through the training program, right? Meaning that the way you'll be trained is going to be very different from the way you'll be trained. It's going to be very different from the way you'll be trained. That in itself makes people feel like, okay, cool, I'm not just a fucking number, right? So build a lot of value there. I'll explain the training here. Here, next thing I'll explain is that we also teach a bit of HR. I don't say second round interviews here. I say HR. Now, this really, really important to make sure that you break this down the right way, right? Because this is where you can lose people. This is where you can fuck up, but you can actually retain a lot of people if you do it the right way. The right way is you want to talk about what we mean by HR. So I'll say, hey, so typically the people who actually conducted your second phase interview are people in phase number two. Okay. Now, the reasoning and the thought process why is because I use this example. I'm like, if you have a lot of outside deals and you started promoting, it's cool because you can give like physical examples. I'll be like, Sanim moved from here to Seattle, right? If you don't have outside deals, that's fine. Use the hypothetical example. So I'm going to use a hypothetical example for today. So I'll be like, hey, so hypothetically, let's say you get to phase four And there's a great opportunity that happens out in Florida. Okay, I like to use Florida because people are like, you want to go to Florida? It's on the East Coast, not too far. So people are like, we can like go to Florida. The whole thought process here is you're getting people to think about leaving, right? Because you don't want a bunch of people want to stay here. You're subconsciously getting people to think about, hey, I'm probably gonna fucking move when I get into management. So subconsciously they're thinking about it, but you're making it sound like a really, really cool thing, which it is at the end of the day, the opportunity, right? So here I'll be like, hey, so let's say you have an opportunity out in Florida. Now, there's a 7-store market, but you have you and the 3 guys on your traveling team. So that is you and 3 other individuals, meaning there's 4 people, but there's 7 stores. Now, you're not going to start full 7 stores with 4 people. Can we agree? Yeah, 100%. So you're going to have to learn how to build and train. Now, would it be cool if your first time actually conducting a second phase interview and learning the whole onboarding process was when you were a marketing manager in Florida, or when you're here still under our roof, so that when you get to Florida, you understand how to do it and it's second nature, which would make sense. They'll be like, yeah, no, definitely. I want to learn that. I'm like, okay, perfect. So that's why we teach you second phase interviews and phase number 2. Now, this super, super important is talking about pyramid scheme and multi-level marketing right here. Okay, because recruiting and like bringing people on, if you don't talk about that the right way, instantly people will be like, yeah, it's a multi-level marketing, it's a pyramid scheme. So immediately you want to get ahead of it, because there is guaranteed in every single orientation at least one motherfucker who comes in and they're skeptical as hell. They're like, this has to be a pyramid scheme. There's no way. That guy, Zimbabwe, 20 what? No fucking chance, right? So you want to address it right here. So right after that, I'm talking about the opportunity, etc., like going out to Florida. And then I'm like, yeah, I've heard before. Someone once said it is a pyramid scheme. Now, very careful with that one, right? Because I've heard some owners say that, what a lot of people think is that this is a pyramid scheme. And I'm like, you're fucked. Like everyone's gonna quit from there, right? So you want to say, hey, I've heard it before. Someone was like, oh my god, is this like a pyramid scheme? Now, key thing is you want to educate them on what a pyramid scheme is, and you want to educate them on what multi-level marketing is and how we're not that. Key thing when delivering this piece of information, make sure you're super indifferent. I know when I was a rookie, I was fucking nervous as shit about it, because older people, like when I had that high turnover, they quit because of that. So I was like, holy shit, dude! Now I have to. We're not a pyramid scheme, swear to God. I don't say shit like that. Make sure you're very indifferent when you're having this conversation. So the way I'll go about it is I'm like, hey, so yeah, I've heard before someone was like, oh my god, is this like a pyramid scheme? And I'm like, I don't know if AT&T, the 13th largest company in the U.S., Costco, the 10th largest company in the U.S., Apple, which was the first company in the U.S. to hit $1 trillion market cap, would be like, sit around a boardroom table and be like, do you know what's a good idea? We should hire a pyramid scheme to represent us. So now, number one, of all the Costco's nationwide, okay, do you guys train them? No, 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 they train themselves. Do you guys like manage them? No, 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 they manage themselves. What else do they do? They actually take people's social security and run credit checks on them every single day in Costco. Do you think that would be a good idea? No, probably not. And I'll also address the fact that, hey, so you guys all signed what we call a W-2 or a W-4. So a W-4 means that you're an actual employee of an actual company, meaning that if I don't pay you, I'm going to go to jail or I'll get deported. And I'll make that joke, right? Get people like, oh, yeah, no, he's fucking right. And then I'll bring up, hey, who's ever heard of like a multi-level marketing company, right? And usually you get like 1 or 2 people who'll be like, yeah, my mom was part of one. Right? Or some people will be like, yeah, no, it's fucking crazy, dude. That shit was fucked up. And I'm like, yeah, 100%. So, and I'll educate people with the multi-level marketing company. You know how multi-level marketing companies work, right? Basically, you have to pay to get into a multi-level marketing or any form of a pyramid scheme. Now, Johnny, did you pay me to get into this job? Fuck no, right? We actually pay you. Do you know what's crazy? If you don't do well, we actually lose money on you. So guess what? there's no way it could be, because with the multi-level marketing, you typically have to pay to get into that. The other thing, if you want to go in detail, so people are like, yeah, fuck that, that's fucking retarded. Like, and they're like, yo, it's probably not. You don't have to go in detail, but if they're still like, thank God he said that, I would go the extra step of talking about like, hey, how who you applied off Indeed, who you applied off LinkedIn, who applied off ZipRecruiter, right? You do know that ZipRecruiter, LinkedIn, Indeed, these companies actually vet all the companies that they put on their job site. So you won't find any multi-level marketing, any pyramid schemes on that. So if you applied through that, it kind of really means that it can't be, right? Because if you've been approached by any form of multi-level marketing, they'll typically hit you up at a gas station. You'll be like putting your gas in your suit. You'll be like, oh, fuck yeah. And they'll be like, hey, man, what do you do for work? Are you trying to make any additional income on the side? I'm like, that sounds fucking weird. Or they'll who's been DM'd on Instagram before telling you, hey, do you want to make any additional money on the side? That is typically what we call a multi-level marketing. And I'm very transparent about it. I don't spend any more time on it. And I go straight into the travel. And we have travel opportunities, right? And here, I'll talk about visiting offices. I'll talk about R&R, et cetera, et cetera. Build a lot of value, but be all very indifferent with it. Right, then phase three, this is the assistant director role. Now, assistant director is here for about 1 to 2 months. Here, really important, don't be like, oh, they're getting incorporated to start their own business. Understand, half these motherfuckers just started for a job. They don't want to run their own business. They want to do anything. So try and avoid having the lingo like you've been, like everyone's been here for a long time, right? Understand, these people are here for their first day, right? They just came here for a regular job 9 times out of 10. So 80, 1 to 2 months here. Basically, I educate them on the fact that when you're an assistant director, your goal is to shadow whoever's a marketing manager, right? So basically, what we're doing here is a lot of the focus is really on the back end operations. So here, you'll focus on things such as, payroll, scheduling. Try not to say too much recruiting, because recruiting gets a little bit funky, right? Orientation. I don't know. What else? Scheduling, orientation, P&Ls, I mean, all the shit assistant directors do just kind of listed here. It doesn't have to be too many things. Don't spend too much time on this. Make sure they understand that here you're just shadowing the marketing manager. And then this is really, really important. Okay. I know when we run opportunity meetings, sometimes we'll use more high-end examples like, yo, you can make like 300K. Here you actually want to downplay it a lot, right? So how I downplay it here, the reasoning why is because if you go out and tell someone this, door-to-door unspecific. So door-to-door, I would talk bigger. Retail, I would talk smaller. The reasoning why is because you don't want to make it seem too good to be true, right? Because already for majority of the people that are sitting in a room, making $100,000 is like, holy shit, like you're fucking rich. No, at the end of the day, it ain't fucking shit. But you kind of downplay it a little bit here. So the way I downplay is I'm like, hey, so basically the average marketing manager makes $25,000 annually, and I'll say per retail location. And then I'll say the average first year they manage, is it still in the shot? Yeah. 3 to 5 locations. Okay. And then super indifferent here. And I'll go back to my laptop to kind of read over the negatives and go over that aspect. But basically here I'm just like, yeah, no, 100%. So you can do the math. It's about $75,000 to $125,000 annually. Don't make it too much of a big deal. Just kind of like brush it off like, yeah, because it really is. If you make 75K as an owner, kill yourself. Like, you fucking stop the job, right? But basically, that. Okay, so from there, you want to make a transition from talking about this into talking about the negatives of the job. Okay. Where you want to transition, talk about the negatives of the job, it's very, very straightforward. I like to make the joke. I'm like, yeah, and I like to be transparent here because, again, our generation, they value transparency. So I'm like, hey, I know when I got the job presented to me, I was like, really appreciate the opportunity because, it is a pretty rigorous interviewing process. But there was a bit of me that felt like this was a bit too good to be true. So I remember I even had a conversation with my mom. I didn't have a conversation with my mom, but I was like, hey, mom, like, I I'm gonna make six figures in a year. She was like, bro, shut the fuck up. You can't even wake up on time. I was like, okay, cool, whatever. Hey, I'll make that joke, just kind of like lighten the mood a bit, and then I'll go over the fact that, hey, so I know when I found the opportunity, I felt it was a bit too good to be true. So and I kind of asked for permission. Is it okay if we talk about the negatives of the job and why people don't succeed here? Right? Typically, people will be like, God, please. I'm like, bro, fucking neg both. Right? And then the first thing I educate people on is turnover. Okay. I'll be completely honest. You have two options with turnover, right? It's either you talk about it now and you're upfront with it, or you're going to get people talking about it and they're probably going to turn over because they don't understand what turnover is. Okay. Right. So the first thing I like to ask people, like this, good job, y'all. The first thing I'll tell people is I'm like, hey, so um, I'll be like, okay, so the first reason why people quit is because a lot of people will come into the job and they'll kind of get this and I'll let people know, I'm like, hey, the first thing is our whole goal is really to filter people out, and I'm transparent about that. Our goal is really to filter people out, meaning that we give the opportunity to a lot of people on the front end. Now, but hey, at the end of the day, anyone is going to say anything to get a job, right? They'll be like, I'll have a good attitude, I'll show up on time, and they have the worst attitude and they're always late, right? So I tell people we give the opportunity to a lot of people on the front end, but in phase two, this is typically when we start, and I'm transparent, this is when we typically start to establish the people that we're gonna actually help build one of these branches for the clients around, right? So because of that, you're going to see what we call turnover. And I'll ask everyone, who knows what turnover is? Turnover rate? No, not that fucking turnover. Right? But basically, turnover. They'll be like, yeah, the amount of people that come in and go out of a company. So I'll educate people on turnover. You need to educate people on turnover, because if you don't educate people on turnover, they're gonna talk about it and it's gonna lead to more turnover, right? So get ahead of it. Get ahead of turnover. So I like to educate people on turnover. I'm like, okay, cool. Who here has played sports? Okay, Johnny, which sport did you play? Oh, you played football? Nice. When did you start playing football? Oh, so you started when you were 8? When did you stop playing football? Okay, in high school. Perfect. So what that means is that Johnny started playing football at the age of 8. So 8 was his entry level date, but 18 is when he stopped playing football, meaning that his entry level date was 8, his exit date was 18. Okay. Now, think of how many people actually start playing football and how many people actually make it to the NFL, right? Typically, how it goes is like this: they make it to their, do you have middle school teams here? Yeah, so make it into a middle school team, then they make it into high school team, make it into a JV team, they make it into a JV team. Some people will, some people won't. Some people make it into a college team, some people won't, some people won't. Some people will get into semi-pro. Some people will, some people won't. Some people will become professional. Some people will, some people won't. And but in each point, that's their turnover rate. So educate them on that. Now, when people understand that, it's like, oh shit. But guess what? The only difference between sports and what we do is that sports is over a 15-year period of time. So it doesn't feel like much. But think of how many people start playing football versus how many people make it to the NFL. That's a stupid high turnover rate, right? The only difference is time. Now, ask people, how long is our training program? Training program is a year. So if it's a year, it's going to feel like more, but it's the same, right? And then from there, I'll talk about who here has heard of medical school. Honestly, you can just ask who's graduated college. If you ask anyone who's graduated college, 9 times out of 10, I'll be like, okay, so all the people that started with you on freshman day, day one, did all of them graduate with you? Fuck no, exactly. So does everyone who start medical school, do they finish medical school? No. Why? Because it's expensive and it's difficult, right? Everyone who start law school, finish law school. No, same reasons, right? So I just like to think of this as business school, but practical, and we're actually paying you. And then that will get people to kind of understand, okay, I get what this is, right? So you've broken down the turnover aspect of it. Now I'll actually go into the reasons why people turn over. These are pretty straightforward. One one big one is people have a misconception about the program. Right? They get in here and they get too caught up with like the day-to-day monotony, and they're like, "Oh, I don't like to talk to customers." I'll break it down. I'm like, dude, if you actually like put it into perspective and you make this a 40-year career, the acquisition specialist role, 3 weeks is like 0.00005% of what you actually do at working at the company. They'll be like, that's true, right? And then you want to take accountability and show a lot of indifference, right? Hey, at the end of the day, if they quit, it's not their fault. They're still good people. Just maybe wasn't a good fit, and maybe I did a bad job at actually explaining the business, right? Reason number two, I'll talk about how some people come in with the intention thinking that it's marketing. And then I'll kind of shit on them a little bit. I'm like, okay, with all due respect, I don't think you, Johnny, I won't call fucking Johnny. I don't think you, Johnny, with your absolute no experience in digital marketing, would be hired by AT&T, the 13th largest company in the United States of America, to do digital marketing for them. I'm sure they have a digital marketing for team, right? So we're a completely different stream of revenue for the client. So we do face to face, and some people come in thinking it's marketing, but at the end of the day, it's not. And again, nothing wrong with them, just probably wouldn't be a good fit. There's also some people, this is the next reason, or some people who come in with the intention thinking that it's a behind the desk job. And I'll joke and I'm like, I think I have ADHD, so I don't think I could stand behind the desk for the whole day, right? So our job, and I'm completely transparent, we're on our feet. We're not walking around, but we're on our feet. At the end of the day, being on our feet, the only people here who have desk jobs is Jolie, Huda, and Sophia, right? They're the HRs in our office, and those are the people who have the behind the desk job. So if you're looking for a behind the desk job, this isn't really it. And again, I'm completely transparent about that upfront, right? Because again, people appreciate transparency. So just being transparent is really important. Um, and then one of the last ones is really I'll talk about. I make a joke. I'm like, yeah, some people complain that the job takes too much of their personal life. I've heard that before. Now, I'll make the joke. I'm like, it is a, I'll be completely honest. It is a 5-day work week. Our only difference, and typically people will be like, it is. It's a 40 hours. I don't know where the fuck they get that from. And then I'll be like, hey, so, but I'll be honest, our schedule is a little bit different. This is retail specific. Schedule is different in the sense of like, hey, we do have one day off during the week and then one day off during the weekend. Now, the one day off during the weekend, some people in their early 20s will be like, oh my God, my weekends are way too sacred and I don't want to work them. Again, that's perfectly fine. At the end of the day, our clients do require a retail aspect from what we do. So at the end of the day, if they don't want to do it, it's just not a good fit. And I'm completely transparent about that. Then the last thing I talk about is the scheduling. With the scheduling, I hit on the fact that we put it out twice a week, once on Sunday for the week, once on Wednesday for the weekend. And the key thing here is educating people on the fact that the reasoning why we're very intense with the schedule and we don't put on like a 4-week basis is really because we just don't want a situation where the reasoning why is because it's a training program. So every single day we're actively trying to train you, right? As managers, the hardest part of our job is writing out the schedule because there's things that we have to think about. There's like, hey, this person lives in Woodbridge, this person lives in Maryland, which would be a very good ideal store for them to collectively work because this person's struggling at closing and this person's good at closing. So I'm trying to match make a lot of things. So if you go and you call out and you don't go to the schedule, you actually put yourself a day back on the training, right? And then I'll talk about also how if you work at like these larger companies or the prior company, if you felt a little bit sick or your left toenail hurt a little bit, you were able to call out. And if you called out, you just found someone to cover your shift. But because we put so much time and attention and detail into the actual scheduling process, because of that, if you call out, all you're really doing is you're putting yourself back a day on training, right? Other thing I'll talk about is I'll just educate them on that. The two things that we cater for is religion and the school schedule. Religion, I'll talk about like, hey, like right now it's Ramadan, so we try and get like the girls to work at least at AM so that they can go back and they can do, yeah, tell them here, fucking tell them, right? They can cook and stuff, and as well as like Sundays if they're like Christian, they go to the thing on Sunday, and then also it's on video. But basically, and then if there are any school schedule restrictions, we cater for people working at schools. I mean, going to school. Yeah, that's pretty much it.